Our closing speaker is Professor Birgitta Henriques Normark.
So thank you. So first I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me here to this meeting. So I will talk very briefly about spread of antibiotic resistance, and I thought I would actually start with a few introductory slides, and you have heard a little bit of this also previously. But if you look into, let's see here. Thank you. So if you look into actually what causes death around the world, you find that the major cause of death is actually infectious diseases, as you can see here. So about 25% of people that die, they actually die because of infectious diseases. And also, if you look into specific infectious diseases, we find that the major cause of death is actually lower respiratory tract infections. And a big proportion of these are caused by pneumonia, caused by bacteria. But of course, also viruses can cause respiratory tract infections, and they cannot be treated by antibiotics. And therefore, it's very important that we have good diagnostics to really tell who should actually have the antibiotics here. But then, of course, we have other infections. We have diarrheal diseases, we have tuberculosis, we have septicemia when they have bacteria in the bloodstream, urinary tract infections, wound infections, and so on. You can come with different infections that need to be treated really with effective antibiotics. And of course, if you don't have that, we have a problem. And I just wanted to show you one example here. If you look into children that got a pneumonia, and pneumonia are mainly caused by a bacterium called pneumococci, and they then have bacteria both in the lungs and also often in the bloodstream. And before we had penicillin, you see that the survival rate was very, very low for these children. 10% actually only survived, so 90% of the children actually died from these infections. But when we got penicillin, as you can see, we actually improved the survival rate enormously. So 90% of these kids actually could survive, and only 10% died. So of course, it's important that we have effective antibiotics. And as you saw also in the introduction, it's not only the infections as such, we also have it, we need to have effective antibiotics because of the modern medicine. For example, for hip replacements, for organ transplants, for cancer chemotherapy, where you have individuals that are very susceptible to get an infection. And even if you have care of preterm babies. So there is really a need of antibiotics that are effective. But why then have we seen this emergence and spread of antibiotic resistance? So I thought I would go through a few points that are very important. And you have heard already today a lot, for example, from Ann Glover and also other speakers here about the antibiotic usage, how important that is, both in humans and in animals. And what antibiotics does is that it selects actually for resistance. So if you have a population of bacteria here, and the green here are the susceptible ones to a specific antibiotic, and you have a red one, here's the bacteria that is resistant. If you treat with antibiotics here, you make a selection. So all the susceptible ones, the green ones, they disappear. But still, you have this resistant one. And this one can then expand and grow, and you have a resistant population. So of course, this means that if you use a lot of antibiotics, you have a selection for resistance. And several studies have shown really correlation with antibiotic usage and also with resistance rates. And I thought I would just show you this, just to give some kind of numbers. And here was a study where they looked into pneumococci causing pneumonia and that were resistant to penicillin. And you have the rates here on this axis. And on this axis, you have the antibiotics usage. And if you look, for example, in countries like France and Spain, that have a very high rate of antibiotic dosage, as a usage, you see that the rate of resistance is also very high, as you can see. On the other hand, if you look into the Scandinavian countries, here, you see, for example, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, they have a very low consumption, but also very low resistance rates. And this is just for one bacterium, but there are studies also for sure for other bacterial species as well. And the bacteria, they acquire these resistance genes by picking up DNA, other genes from other bacteria in the surrounding environment, or that they actually get mutation-specific resistance genes. And then when they are resistant, they can spread globally. And you have seen already a few examples. I will show you one more. And this is for MRSA. And as you can see here in Europe, we have a huge problem here. You can see several of the MRSA actually causing severe infections are actually resistant, and more of them are more than 50% resistant, as you can see here. But this is in Europe, and we know that there are certain successful clones that actually stands behind these numbers. I will come back to these successful clones just in a minute. But as you can see, I mean, these resistance rates are also found in other parts of the world, so it's spread globally, so it's really a global problem. But I mentioned the successful clones. So the successful clones, these are bacteria that are very closely genetically related. They have approximately the same kind of factors that promote the spread. And we can see that, for example, if you look into certain bacteria, that the same kind of bacteria are found in several parts of the world, so they're really spreading globally. And that's the case for MRSA, but this is also the case that I will show you here, another example. And now we come back to pneumococci again. And we have very few pneumococci that are resistant in Sweden. But those that we have, a majority of these, they belong to the same clonal type. And actually this clone emanated from Spain, as you can see here, and then it was spread to Sweden, but also to the rest of the world. And we think here that specifically some factors within the bacteria are also important for how successful they are, that can actually promote the spread. So it's not only the usage, it's actually also intrinsic factors of the bacteria might promote the spread of antibiotic resistance. And this is important because we could potentially target these factors with, for example, vaccines or actually treatments as well. Another example you heard about just recently by the previous speaker is the spread now recently by this NDM1. As you heard, this is a resistant gene that is found mainly in gram-negative bacteria, and ND stands for New Delhi, so it started in India and then has been spreading around the world now, as you can see, and really threatening effective therapy on these gram-negative infections. And also here you can get this clonal spread. Then I just want to mention also, of course, we haven't discussed that so much today, but the poor sanitation and poor hygiene is, of course, also very important. So, for example, at hospital, hand washing is really important to really stop spreading. And then I just want to finish by just saying that it's also very important that you heard also previously about the alarming decline in drug development. And we had a lot of new discoveries of drugs between the 1930s and 1990s, but since then, very few new novel antibiotics have come, and this is really something that we have to reinforce. So if I then just try to summarize very briefly some points that are very important, and you have also heard them before, so I just want to stress them again. And of course, one is really development of new antibiotics, but we have also to think about how we use the antibiotics, and we can, by that, also prolong the lifespan of already existing antibiotics. So the rational use that many people here have talked about is really important, and really to just use them when they are needed. And that goes, of course, both for animals and humans, but also, of course, for the environment, and I will not discuss the environment today. But to do this, we need, of course, also better diagnostics. This is also very important. And for the prevention of the spread, as I said, improved hygiene is very important, infection control. But then we can also use vaccines. This is another way of actually trying to prevent the spread of infections. And by that, I want to finish and also acknowledge Karin Tegmark-Wisell and Anna Sorset for sharing some of the slides with me. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Henriques Normark. Again, questions in a second. I'm going to avoid trying to trip over your feet down there. And we're going to have another of our final one of our spot polls coming up now. So again, 44, 56, 22 is the code. Do you think, I think researchers plural, there's more than one of them. Do you think researchers have solved the question of antibiotic-resistant bacteria in 20 years, i.e., will they have in 20 years? The English has got a bit garbled on that one. But do you think researchers will have solved the question of antibiotic-resistant bacteria in 20 years? 1 for yes, 2 for no. So far, the pessimists are in the lead, or are they the realists? Again, we'll give it a few more seconds. Yeah, there's a sort of slight increase. No, I think, generally speaking, by a ratio of about 2 to 1, and a little bit more than that, 2-1, which is the most common score in the World Cup as well. It is saying that no, they won't have. Which way would you vote?
I think it's a tricky question, actually, because I think that we have solved probably many of the problems, but probably not all. Because even if we get new antibiotics, I'm sure we'll get more resistance as well. So this is really something that we have to work on, I think, all the time, also for the future.
Which is a gentle and caring way of saying you'd vote no.
Yes.
Oh, you vote yes. Oh, okay, you vote yes. You think you will do with some limitations as well. Now, we're very nearly out of time, but it's your last chance to ask some questions. So who would like to go first? Gentleman there. Hang on, I've got a microphone here, which I think should be on now.
Thank you. Georg Dahm from the German science magazine Substanz. A question to all the researchers that have spoken to us. Do you feel any pressure from lobbyists, from pharmaceutical companies or from veterinarian associations that try to influence your work or generally swing the public opinion in your disfavor?
Should I just maybe start, and maybe we can send the question to the others as well. I haven't felt any pressure from the industry, but I think it's a problem that the industry is not maybe always so interested in actually developing, for example, new antibiotics, because they need to have something they can use for everything that they could really profit from by selling the drugs. And for us, it's important to really keep the drugs, to really be able to use them so that we don't have resistance develops to everything, so that you can really, treat the difficult infections. So far, no, I haven't felt the pressure, but maybe the others, yes?
Okay, Henrik, do you want to come up and share a microphone?
No, I can speak up.
Yeah, I think you can, it's true.
I was deeply involved in the scientific debate that led to the eventual ban of growth hormones, antibiotic growth hormones for animals in Europe, and I can say it was a heated debate, and there was also a lot of pressure also on individuals. Threats of lawsuit, making you personally responsible for big pharmaceutical companies' losses if something was put in place in regulation. So yes, and the Commission was taken to court by the companies, and we had to go up and defend, of course, the case, which eventually was won. So yes, there was a lot, but I think it's more civilized now than it was then in Europe, or maybe more hidden behind the cover because they realized that they could lose. They didn't think they could lose then. But I think in India it might be different.
Okay, there's a question from behind you here.
I wanted to ask...
Hold the mic a bit closer.
Hello. I wanted to ask, I know we were focusing on antibiotics, but I wanted to find out about the use of antibacterial soaps and antibacterial wipes. They seem to be more and more popular, and what role do they have in antibiotic resistance, if any?
I don't know how much is actually known about how much they can actually influence antibiotic resistance development. But I mean, if they are, for example, would use the same kind of compounds, for sure they are not. But if they would do that, of course that would also influence, I'm sure. But this is maybe something one have to think about more, I think. And the environment as such, what actually happens here. And also, I mean, we have, for example, a lot of antibiotic traces in, for example, sewage and water, drinking water, and this kind of stuff as well. And we haven't discussed that so much today, but this is also, of course, important.
We are very nearly out of time, so got 3 hands going up. Who's got a really great climactic question? So let's hope it's you.
So I really like your point about hygiene and sanitation, which we seem to forget, and especially in hospitals, it's a serious problem. I guess I would feel much more comfortable visiting a farm rather than going to a hospital, because the risk of acquiring a resistant bug there is much, much higher. And it's clear that one of the real sources of transmission and obtaining resistant bacteria is in the hospital sector.
Okay, I think that can stand as a comment by itself. We're going to squeeze in one more illegally, so right, go to that gentleman there. Short answer, please, Birgitta, as well, because we are just desperately out of time.
My understanding is a case of research and development through sharing of knowledge and that sort of thing. But if you could make a technological leap, a real game-changing innovation, what would it be?
Innovation, how do you mean? I mean, innovation...
Technology, I don't know, big machines.
I mean, what I would like to have is really new antibiotic classes and not just development on the old ones. I really would have new ones and hopefully some that we don't get resistant development, but this is really just a wish, I think.
Yeah, okay. On that fantastic note, we'll have to leave it. Can we please thank Professor Birgitta Henriques Normark?